then you're not going to get the investment impact and the growth in the economy that the government expects.
Melissa Lantsman dropped one of the most important videos that you could watch today that really explains the truth about what's going on here, and also the fact that conservatives, we aren't just these big, negative, mean people. No, we're just really observant, actually. I'm Jasmine Lane. Subscribe, like, follow, and comment your thoughts down below. As always, share this video as well. If things were fine, they wouldn't have to constantly ram down our throats how fine everything is, right? That's just like common sense 101. And with that, we have to talk about the latest pieces of media propaganda going around. That's what it is by definition, as well as, you know, just this criticism I have where, isn't it kind of weird that on panels on CBC and CTV, even the conservative strategists have the same talking points as the liberals? I don't know if I'm the only one who thinks that's kind of odd.
And declares, I've given it careful consideration, and I have concluded that I am flawless, that voters erred, and I need to fix nothing about myself. And I just think it's obviously a ridiculous look. And if his impulse, if his goal is to signal strength, it does the exact opposite. It just spotlights his insecurity. Nothing is more unattractive. Nothing strikes a stranger tone than someone who says, I got nothing wrong with me. I need to make no corrections, no fixes whatsoever.
And yes, the media is still running panels with some of the least conservative people speaking their advice to Pierre Poilievre. Pretty sure that somebody who hates conservatives as much as Scott Reed does is not who they're going to be taking advice from. I'm also quite positive I have never heard him describe anything in that light towards Mark Carney, who has also gone back on things, who has also put his foot down in some ways. And if you're thinking to yourself, well, my goodness, at least there's a conservative, Corey Tenike, on the panel, he's really got our back, you would be mistaken.
The sort of mean girls, acidic apple eating kind of style that he brings to media relations at times, I don't think makes him more likable. I think it makes him less likable. So I don't get the strategy, and I don't get the tactics in doing that. And I just don't see what's gained by acting like a jerk, frankly.
It's weird, right? Oh, but we're so non-biased and rational because we have Corey Tenike on the panel, who was like a conservative strategist for Doug Ford, who really did actively campaign against Pierre Poilievre in the last election. But that's how they get away with it, because then the interpretation of that is, oh, wow, see, even conservatives think that what he's doing is really bad. And I have to be honest, and I'll share a little story with you here. The amount of people who just blindly follow headlines, and they're so easy to spot out, the headliners, they never dig into the article. They're never curious. Our loss of curiosity has been one of the greatest destroyers of what we once had. And that loss of curiosity, of critical thinking, is very intentional. They overflow you with information of a particular type so that you don't feel like you need to research more because it's the news. I'm obviously getting the full story here. And then you log on to your social media platforms with your tailored algorithms as determined by the CRTC, thanks to Bill C-11 and C-18. And all you see is more confirmation bias towards that narrative. That's how all of this works. That is how propaganda and psychological manipulation works on a population, and it has worked very successfully here in Canada. It has also worked very successfully in countries that were once capitalist, who then shifted towards socialism or communism.
Here's capitalist South Korea at night from space. Here's socialist North Korea. Yeah. In 1990, Venezuela was wealthier than Poland, but then Poland, finally free of Soviet-style economics, went all in on capitalism. And now their economy is as big as Japan. And people there have high wages, low inflation, cars, vacations, homes. Meanwhile, Venezuela traded capitalism for Hugo Chavez's socialism for the 21st century, which turned out to be like socialism in the last century, or any century, a fucking mess. It turned one of Latin America's richest countries into one of its poorest. Low wages, high inflation, shortages, outages, 8 million people fleeing.
So why does the left hate Pierre Poilievre? Why do they call him mean? Because he doesn't want citizens to be dependent on the government. Well, that's exactly why. because he doesn't want citizens to need all of the many layers of bureaucracy, all of the technocratic, central, top-down UN World Economic Forum control. And I'm not putting words in their mouth here. They outline all the time. They brag about how great it is that there's so many people they need to help, how great it is you should be voting for them because we are going to help all of these people. We're going to fix the symptom, not the cause. We are not going to address the cause at all because if we did, you wouldn't need us. And Pierre Poilievre wants to address the cause. That's the really big difference. That's why they hate him so much. And, I also really want to squash this emotional idea. And it's emotional because that's exactly how the left has gained so much power, which we will be getting into a little bit more today. This idea that Pierre Poilievre is mean and therefore he's a bad leader. Good leaders don't cater to everybody. There's sacrifice always. There is no permanent solutions per se. There's a trade-off at every step of the way. And your job as a good leader is to make sure that the trade-off that you acquire is better for the biggest majority of people that exist. Whereas the left is very much of the mindset that it doesn't matter how small the group, as long as we're being compassionate and emotional and grabbing at people's hearts. Oh, those poor people that make up 0.5% of the population. And that's not to be confused with not having any sort of empathy or even sympathy towards those people. Those people matter. It doesn't matter how small they are. They're human beings and we love them because we walk this earth with them and they matter. But when it comes to liberal policies, oftentimes the trade-off is so unbalanced, right? And we see that with the economy, with certain programs that get funded, certain ideologies that get pushed, and it makes no sense for the greater good of a nation. And there is a balance there. You can have both. You can have that compassion. We acknowledge you. We love you. We want to support you. We're here for you without completely upending the lives of the rest of your citizens to cater to that particular group. And there's a lot of nuance there. So that's certainly something we can dig into at a later time. But to me, Pierre Poilievre being direct, putting his foot down, I don't interpret that in the slightest as being mean. I actually interpret that as being really refreshing. Finally, somebody is saying no to the emotional appealing noise that is completely irrelevant to any of the problems that we face. I like that. That is strong to me. That is very, very strong. I want a leader who has a spine. And I want to share a bit of a personal story here that I haven't talked about before, where a couple weeks back, I was in Ottawa. I was at a private event and Pierre Poilievre was there as well. And if you are familiar with my story, why it was that I got into politics as hard as I am, you will know this portion already. But if not, the main reason behind it is because my last boyfriend, who I spent 10 years of my life with, after struggling for many years, he took his life. And I can't tell you how many times we had conversations where he would reflect on how it didn't matter how hard he worked, he just couldn't get ahead. And as a man, I think that there was a lot of feelings of instability, of not being good enough, not being deserving of a certain outcome, no matter how hard you tried. And of course, there's so many details to that. But that was really a moment for me that sparked me. Like after he died, what are you going to take from me? Like I've been to hell and back. There is nothing that means anything that you can take from me anymore. I don't care if I lose my job. I don't care if I lose friends. You think some mean trolls on the internet are going to take me down? Good luck with that one. And he was a really big fan of Pierre Poilievre. We used to watch him in Question Period together and stuff like that. Like he was so politically active, way more than myself at the time, and very much the inspiration for me to kind of keep trucking on the way that I have throughout all of that. But I have this thing that I've been doing where after he passed away, we used to always make these like little birthday cards for each other. And I made a birthday card for him when it was his birthday the following year. And I keep it on me all the time, just in case I run into like a family member, a friend, somebody who loved him or was inspired by him, so that they can sign his birthday card. And at this event with Pierre Poilievre, I had this card on me. It's in my purse all the time. And I had asked if Pierre could sign it. And he said, of course I will. Of course I will. And so towards the end of the event, and there's all these people pulling and grabbing at him, you know, wanting to ask him questions, wanting to take pictures with him. But he actually stepped away from everybody and came up to me and asked me if I could give him the card so he could sign it. And he brought it to it like a back table. And he really thought about what he was going to write in it. And he signed it, and he came up to me afterwards, and, you know, he shook my hand and offered me some really encouraging words. And honestly, I think one of the most notable moments for me in terms of Pierre Poilievre's character is that we're there and there's all these people around us. And I'm starting to get like this, where I'm starting to get kind of teary-eyed talking about it. And he was like so attentive to me, you know, and offering me kindness in that moment. Meanwhile, there's all these people around, like he's got to get going and everybody's wanting a piece of him. But he took that moment for me. And I know that I'm not the only one he's taken moments like that for either. And so it actually really irritates me when I see people talking about how mean Pierre Poilievre is, because I've had the opportunity at this point in time to meet Poilievre on several occasions, to have phone calls with him and to interview him, of course, as well. And I don't view him as mean at all. And, you know, even actually at that same event, I had confided in some people on his team that when Andrew Scheer was running, as an example, I didn't like Andrew Scheer. He's grown on me since then, but I didn't find him relatable at the time. You know, I voted for him based on party platform, but I wasn't a big fan of his by any stretch. Whereas Pierre Poilievre, prior to even meeting him, prior to all of that happening in my life, I really liked him. Something really resonated the way that he spoke to us, and it really meant something to me. And so to me, when I hear stories like this from so many other people in the country, it's irritating and so obvious why the liberals and left-leaning pundits and the media is trying so hard to focus on the noise around him to tear him down. Because when you can connect with people in a way like he has, that is a huge, huge threat.
That was the reason why we were able to add 2.5 million votes and 25 additional seats and come within a whisker of forming government in the last election. We're here to say thank you for all of that hard work and tell you that we need you to do it again. We were about 30,000 votes properly distributed from winning a majority government in the last election. The difference, therefore, is going to be our ground game. But it is also going to be our policy agenda. As you know, we have been winning every single policy debate there is on inflation, carbon taxes, natural resources, crime, drugs. Our agenda is the prevailing one. Now, the Liberals go through 3 stages of denial when it comes to our conservative policies. First, they say the Conservatives have no policies. It's all slogans. And then they say, the conservative policies are very scary. And then they say, finally, we agree with all the conservative policies and we're going to make them ours. And they plagiarize them. Now, they only plagiarize them in words, not in deeds. They don't actually implement them.
I want you to really pay attention to that as well, because we are seeing this shift in the country where the Liberal Party is attempting to be a little bit more center, which is a good thing. But they're not fully committing to that. And it's almost as though the electorate actually does want a conservative government, but they're so scared to just admit that, you know, they're so scared to get rid of this idea that I'm a liberal because I'm a good person and I'm a good person because I'm a liberal. I'm not even going to try to think about not being a liberal because, my goodness, that would mean I'm a bad, mean conservative like the media thinks. And that's why it's so important for us to really drive that home. That's a total fallacy. Like, there is nothing at all that makes any sense about that. But that narrative, that rhetoric is what has allowed the Liberal Party to dominate the way that it has today and to put us in situations as bad as they are right now.
From our perspective, we think that the definition the government's used around capital investments is overly expensive. And in particular, they've thrown some things in there, some categories of spending, which other jurisdictions in other countries would not typically include. Most notably, the inspiration, of course, for this framework comes from the United Kingdom. And in the case of the UK, it's a far narrower definition. And of course, the biggest risk with all of this is if you're not spending on productive capital investments, if you have an overly broad definition, then you're not going to get the investment impact and the growth in the economy that the government expects.
Put up a graphic for you. The government's categorization puts it at $311 billion in capital investments, which is significantly higher than the watchdog's number of $217 billion. So that's a difference of $94 billion that the watchdog says should be added to operational costs. So basically, the PBO is saying that the government is lowballing its operational costs. And even though it has this plan, this target of balancing the operational budget in 3 years, it's not going to make it, Mike.
But no. We don't want you focusing on the actual tangible results, of which we already have 10 years of data to prove. Instead, we want to use those emotions of yours to have you focus on something that is factually incorrect and completely irrelevant, i.e., Trump tariffs being the reason why your cost of living is so bad. And let's not forget, by the way, we have the best deal in the world, according to Mark Carney. And also, what is it? Close to 90% of all of our goods are completely tariff-free. But let's not allow that to get in the way of a really emotional narrative.
The survey by BMO finding 41% plan to cut back on holiday spending and 15% budgeting to shell out more on gifts, anticipating higher prices due to tariffs.
It is concerning that, everything is more expensive.
Some said they plan to buy more Canadian-made products to avoid tariffs, while a quarter said they started shopping early to avoid potential tariff-related price increases. And respondents on average plan to spend $2,300, which includes travel and food.
There's this general just concern from Canadians of just maybe needing to be really fiscally responsible over the holidays, because there's still a little bit of uncertainty of where things are headed next year.
There is no world where the cost of shoes, jeans, iPhones, groceries, home goods, your kids' Christmas gifts are going to be more expensive as a result of Trump tariffs at all. Your groceries are not going to be more expensive as a result of that. Actually, dare I say, you're welcome, because it was Canada eliminating the tariffs that were in breach of USMCA as a result of my interview with Ambassador Hoekstra that caused that to be the outcome, because that was actually why groceries were more expensive before. The only thing that has actually caused prices to increase is the weak Canadian dollar, stacked taxes, and retail price padding. That's it. And so the reason why the liberals and mainstream media love the tariff myth is because it hides all of their failures. You know, they want Canadians to believe that tariffs raised prices. Trump is the villain. The U.S. is breaking Canada. Oh my gosh, your grocery bill is insane because of Donald Trump. But that's not the truth at all. That's actually just categorically false. And the thing about this that's really frustrating is the fact that all of this internal damage control, a non-biased, nonpartisan story would have said people think it's due to tariffs, but here's a friendly reminder that it's not. But instead of doing that, they just present it with tariff being thrown at you every step of the way to leave you with the idea that it's actually relevant, but it's not. Because Donald Trump didn't break Canada, tariffs didn't break Canada, Americans had nothing to do with the situation economically that we are in. Ottawa did. 10 years of Ottawa and the continuation of it under this liberal government is what has actually done all of the damage that we currently face. And, you know, the government doesn't have to tell the truth, but I encourage you to look at the receipts, because the receipts certainly do.
Every single part of this historic, quote, generational change just involved more government, a new department, a new regulatory process for the private sector to follow, and ultimately more centralized government control of the Canadian economy. We can argue with the billions in new spending, the tens of billions of new debt that you'll pay for, the zero mention of pipelines, or the zero efforts to rein in inflation. And believe me, I will. But frankly, I want to focus on something much more insidious than that. The liberal tendency for central planning.
So that's part of, you don't answer, we answer that question with full information by doing the work. And that's what the referral to the major project office facilitates. Thank you.
Central planning, in a nutshell, is a system in which a small group of government officials claims power to control an entire nation's economy, deciding what will be produced in what quantity, by whom, and at what price, replacing the voluntary choices of millions of individuals with the compulsory orders of the state. It's the ultimate expression of government overreach, the belief that a handful of bureaucrats can successfully direct the lives of everyone else, when history shows us that they always fail. They only produce shortages and stagnation and the utter loss of ambition. What this budget screams is that liberals want a government that will try to steer an entire economy from a windowless room in Ottawa.
I really meant to talk about Melissa Lantsman's video a lot more today, but as you can tell, I got a little distracted talking about some other things. So we will touch on that more tomorrow because it was incredible what she put out. I wanted to emphasize though, so today we have a budget vote. Everybody's losing their minds. Very typical budget talk. Oh, is the government going to fall? Blah, 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 non-confidence motion. And as much as, yes, absolutely, I would love it if we could have an election and the Conservatives could win and they could make some really big changes that are really needed. I'm not at all in support of an election being called right now for reasons I've shared many times before. It would not be in our best interest for that to happen. So what I think is going to happen today is there's going to be some people from various parties who ever so conveniently don't vote on the budget because they are not present to do so, and that the budget is going to pass. And as much as that sucks, I think it's a good thing in the long game. You know, I know that it's really satisfying perhaps to have your wants and needs met immediately, but in the world of politics, I think that it's equally important to play the long game. And I really do believe that Carney needs to give his voter base a little bit more time to have their eyes opened up to the reality of what he is going to be doing to us. And that reality will be met with another election sooner than 3 years from now, I presume, where honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if it's in the spring, where at that point in time, Conservatives can win by an absolute landslide and really have the power to change the direction that we are headed in. For all I know, I could be wrong, and it ends up being that, yep, there is a non-confidence vote, and boom, we are going to be at the polls again in January. And if that ends up being the case, we will break all of that down tomorrow. I hope you have a beautiful day, and thank you so much for watching. I'm Jasmine Lane. Subscribe, like, share, and comment your thoughts down below, and I'll talk to you very soon.